You want to spend about $300 for a steering wheel that works with any base? Look no further. In this video I'll show you why this is the way to go. And of course, the usual disclaimer, the wheel was provided by Simagic for the review, but all the thoughts and opinions are my own. And we'll start with the price. This wheel costs $289 plus taxes. And if you want to use this magnetic USB cable in the back, you have to add another $20. But you can save 3% with code DAN3 in the Simagic store or 5% at Simrace shop using code DAN5. So the first impression, the box looks very nice. It of course comes with a bazillion tools like typical Simagic, all the cables. There even is a USB extension cable that you can mount to your rig in the box. Very nice. And when you first have it in your hands, it doesn't feel as premium as other wheels because of the weight. It's a very light wheel. This is like 1 kilogram without the QR, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. And to be honest, this material looks pretty nice and also feels relatively good, but it is made out of something I would call like a fancy plastic. It's a composite material made out of polycarbonate, ABS, and carbon fiber. And even though it looks like forged carbon, it's not a forged carbon wheel. I've seen that on some other reviews, but that's not correct. It is a plastic composite material. You probably have seen this kind of material being used on the Moza wheels or Azatec, for example. It's the same thing. But that being said, the material does feel very good. It's super robust. It's light. There's no flags, no creaks, at least like with the wheel that is now like a month old. And yeah, I mean, of course, this doesn't feel as premium as an aluminum body with a carbon fiber front, but also this is $300 and just doesn't cost as much as the premium wheels with the higher quality materials. I've heard from other wheels that use this material that they develop some sort of creaking after a few months of use. Obviously, this wheel is very new. I cannot comment on that. If it should start making weird sounds or so while I'm using it, I will update it in the comments down below, but so far it's been very good. Then the basic specs. We have 10 RGB buttons, 4 rotary switches, 2 thumb encoders, 2 funky switches, and on the back we have 2 shifters, a dual clutch, a total of 73 RGB LEDs in the front. And like I said earlier, the wheel is very light, 1036 grams without the QR, and the QR adds about 450. But with the weight of the QR in the middle, that doesn't really affect how the force feedback feels. But I'd say we start with the front. We have these 10 really nice RGB buttons. You can control them either with the Simagic software or with Simhub. This wheel actually is fully compatible with Simhub. Just keep in mind you need to use a USB connection. Even if you use a Simagic base, for Simhub compatibility, USB needs to be attached. The buttons do feel very nice. I measured them at 6.3 Newton activation force, which is actually more than what Simagic advertises, so maybe my measurement device isn't super correct, or with the tolerances it's just a little bit better than what they claim. And it feels very similar to what they use on their higher end wheels or what other high-end wheels uses. It's their typical PCB mounted SMT switch, very low throw, nice and tactile feel, so nothing to complain here. The 10 buttons do sound slightly different depending on the position on the wheel, but that is just due to the resonance of this plastic composite body. The RGB diffusion of the buttons itself is, I would say, okay. I have seen wheels that do it a little bit better, but it's not as bad as on Cube Controls, for example. So especially with the stickers installed, it's really hard to see the spotlight that the LED in the button generates. Then we also have the typical 7-way funky switch on the front: push, up, down, left, right, and rotate. Sim racers love it. And to save a little bit on the cost, this actually has a plastic knob, still feels okay. And the plastic knobs are also being used on the 4 rotary switches on the front. And even though these are switches, as of today, in the current firmware, it's not supported as a switch. It only works as an incremental encoder. So if you turn it in one direction, it sends one button. If you turn it into the other direction, it sends another button. But Simagic says that the actual switch mode, 12 position, will be implemented in firmware later. The encoders do not have a push button. I also was not able to measure the rotational force needed to turn them because I just couldn't remove the plastic knobs. I don't know if they are glued on. I didn't want to destroy the wheel, so I didn't bother. But they are relatively okay to turn. There are definitely wheels that have weaker encoders. There are wheels with stronger encoders, but again, $300. I think for that price tag, the encoders feel really good. There are also 12 LEDs around it, which combined with Simhub can give you some very nice toys to play with. For example, if you map the LEDs to ABS, you will always see in which ABS mode you currently are. I always think like if you have a rotary switch, you will also see, depending on the position of the knob, in which setting you are. But for example, if you load a setup that has ABS set to 4, but your switch is set to 2, it will directly switch it to 2, so that can be a little bit annoying. With this implementation, you can set it up so that the LED will show you are on ABS position 4, and then if you just use it in the incremental encoder mode, you can basically always represent the current state of ABS or traction control with this LED ring. Pretty cool implementation, and if you spend some time with Simhub, you can do cool stuff with it. Then we have two thumb rotaries with an aluminum knob actually. The resistance of this one is very weak. It's not very hard to turn. Again, I still think it's okay. I prefer thumb rotaries that are not so hard to turn because in the middle of driving, it's just easier to use that. But if you want to use that for very, very precise adjustments, I would probably use these instead. And then on top, we have a shift light indicator with 15 RGB LEDs. Of course, everything configurable in Simhub. The stickers that come with the wheel are actually nice quality. They have a very nice matte finish to them. The print looks very good, and it's definitely one of the better stickers that I've seen. Then, if we look at the back, you see that the default version actually comes with shift pedals and clutch pedals, which is insane for that price. This shifter clutch assembly also is made out of aluminum. There's very, very minimal play in it, and honestly, for this price, I was very, very surprised about the quality of this unit. The activation force needed to shift is 8 Newton roughly. I mean, it always depends on the position of this aluminum shift pedal, so if it's further in, it requires a little higher force to turn, physics, you know. But it's around about 8 Newton, which feels very, very good. It also has dampers in both directions. If I go to the microphone here, you can hear it, but it's really one of the quietest shifters I've seen. The downside is it doesn't feel as tactile as a shifter without any dampers, but it's always a compromise. Do you want a loud shifter that is very tactile, or do you want a quiet shifter? Simagic definitely went with the quiet shifters here. Adjustability of the whole unit is very, very limited. You pretty much can adjust the position of the shift pedal and that's it. But also ergonomically, I think Simagic pretty much nailed it with the default position, so I didn't feel the need to adjust anything. I mean, also I wouldn't be able to, but I do think this position that they chose will work for most people. The clutches also feel very good, have a nice resistance that is required to push them down. The travel is like, I'd say it's a medium travel. For launching the car, this will work very well. You can either use it in the throttle and brake mode, where it will output 2 different axes, or you can set it to a dual clutch mode. Or if you play a game that doesn't support a dual clutch, like ACC for example, you can also set it to button mode and then use it to look left, right, or something like that. Technology, contactless Hall sensors, you know it, I think this is the best approach. This will not wear and it's relatively reliable. There might be some drift over time, but typically you can just calibrate them again in case something goes wrong. If done correctly, it will automatically calibrate while using, but I have no access to the firmware obviously, and it's hard to figure out while testing. Then they also have the Up Plus program, which is just marketing blah blah for exchangeable modules. So for example, what has been teased is like a 6-pedal module, so that you have 4 shift pedals and 2 clutches, but I think it's not available as of today. But the first part that is available in the Up Plus program is already mounted on my wheel, and that is this magnetic cable. And this magnetic cable system is a really good idea by oh wait, wrong wheel, sorry. Okay, so joke aside, Simagic basically copied the system that Apple uses for their power supply or cube controls on their steering wheels, and it will just hold in place with a magnetic force. I've had 0 issues with this. The magnetic connection is probably even stronger than on the cube controls wheels. I don't see any problems with disconnections there. But what I don't like is, why don't manufacturers just talk to each other and use the same cable? I mean, I said in the past, this magnetic system is really, really good from cube controls. It is, and this also is, but it's still like annoying. If you, for example, switch from a Simagic wheel to a cube controls wheel, it would have been cool to just like use the same cable, but now you have to exchange the cable as well. Slightly annoying, but it is what it is. If you actually want to get this magnetic cable, you need to buy this MagLink kit for $20. I think the price is reasonable. I don't really know why it doesn't ship with it, because the default plate that is installed has a USB-C, but I don't really see any use for this. I mean, okay, if you actually use an Azatec base and you have one of those quick releases here, then it might be useful to connect this and then get a very, very short USB-C to USB-A cable and just connect it directly to their QR. But for everyone else, pretty much the USB-C is kind of useless. So I would have preferred if they just shipped it with this plate, maybe sell the cable for 15 bucks or so. It is very, very easy to exchange. It's 4 screws in the back, and then the whole unit just goes off. There should be 2 cables in here when you get it. I removed the little PCB because I don't use a Simagic base right now. But basically, if you want to put this on, just connect this cable. Obviously, connect your quick release to this plate. It supports any quick release with a wheel pattern of 50 to 70 millimeters. But just be careful when you put it back together that you do not squish the cables. You don't want to be like cube controls. Just pay a bit attention that the cable is routed properly. then screw in the 4 screws, and you're good to go. Talking of cube controls, I just have the old style QR from Simagic connected here. You see the updated QR has a slightly bigger ring to pull off the wheel from the base. This is old style. I mean, it's still relatively easy to remove the wheel with this, but it's definitely much nicer. I think they say 50% bigger area for your fingers. It's definitely easier to remove the wheel with this bigger ring. Sometimes, very rarely, I would say in 1 of 10 cases, it happened to me that I connect the USB and the wheel would get stuck in this boot up animation and then wouldn't work. If that happened, I just had to disconnect and reconnect. Not a big deal. I'm sure this will be fixed in firmware eventually. It's just something that I sometimes had on my wheel. All right, let's talk about ergonomics next. And this wheel, 300mm, you know it by now. It's my preferred size for a sim racing steering wheel. I think it suits a lot of cars. The grips are silicone type grips. I think it's probably the same material as on GSI, Cube Controls, Usher, the newer ones. I think they all use the same. They are a medium thickness and are very nice ergonomically shaped. They call it, I don't know, there's some marketing blah blah for it, like double C something something. Basically, they feel good. The thumb rotaries are very nice to reach here. The only slight complaint that I maybe have is like the funky switches. With my hands, it's hard to reach them while being in the middle of the corner where you adjust all your pit strategy and everything, right? I have to let go of the wheel slightly to be able to reach it, but again, I don't think it's a big deal. But if you want something very, very easy accessible, well, it's not that easy here. Electronics inside, I had a quick look. I couldn't disassemble the wheel completely because of the, I don't know, like glued on rotary caps. But what I could see was a very, very clean design. Simagic definitely knows how to do PCBs. So this is all good in this wheel. So when you go on track, the first thing you notice immediately is this is a freaking light wheel. I definitely had to reduce my force feedback because it was just too aggressive and too wild when coming from the Cube Controls wheel. And this will be a very nice fit, especially with weaker bases. So for example, if you have an Alpha Mini with not a lot of torque or like something like a Moza R9 or what do I know, this is a great fit because low weight, force feedback will feel more detailed. Even on a base with a lot of headroom for force feedback like the SimCube 2 Pro that I typically use, you notice the difference. I'm not saying it's better if you have a lot of power, but it's definitely more responsive compared to a heavier wheel. Okay, I want to quickly show you the software. You can either use the SimPro Manager by Simagic or Simhub. I would recommend Simhub. The only problem that I see here, which is a little bit unfortunate, as you can see, Simhub is running and SimPro Manager says this device is now controlled by Simhub. The problem, I can't adjust my byte point if Simhub is running, which is a little bit annoying. I think they should at least unlock the byte point adjustment when Simhub is running because that will be a little pain. Anyways, I would recommend use Simhub. I will not talk a lot about the SimPro Manager, even though you can do light effects here as well and RPMs and stuff, but I would just recommend using Simhub. It's the first wheel that has Simhub support, and get a license. Simhub is great. Thank me later. But yeah, adjustment of the clutches is done here. It's a little weird because you do not have a master clutch. It's like I think it's like that on the Fanatec wheels as well. So if you use one, it goes to the byte point. If you use the other one, it goes to the byte point. If you use both, it will go to 100%. If you let go of one or the other, it will go to the byte point. You get the idea. One way to implement it. Problem. Some people use the clutch for fuel saving on iRacing, and then you pretty much cannot have a dual clutch because you don't want to pull both pedals to save fuel. So maybe they should have like a little mode switch where you can set it to a master-slave clutch system. I would love to see that here. But then you can also set the clutch to button mode here, for example, for ACC. But that's pretty much it already what I want to show you in the SimPro Manager. We'll talk about Simhub. So to add the wheel in Simhub, the typical add new device, go to Simagic. Select the Simagic GT Neo. I already have a profile here, so I'm not going to do it. Let's enable the device. And then we have 3 sections here. We have the RGB LEDs, which is the shift light stuff on top. Then we have the button lighting, which is, well, the buttons and the encoders. And then we also have the ungrouped LED control. In the button lighting, every button and every encoder will be one LED. Even the 12 LEDs that you see here will just be mapped to one LED. If you want to access individual lights on this, you want to use the ungrouped LED control, then you have access to all 73 or whatever LEDs. So for example, if you want to implement something like I talked about earlier with the ABS, what you can do, I'm not a Simhub expert. There are people that know way more about Simhub. So I'm sure the community will create amazing profiles for this wheel, but I just want to give you some ideas how you can do something like that. For that, you want to go to Add Effect. search for formula, custom formula status LED. And then, for example, if we go to one of the rotary LEDs here, I don't know if you can really see in the camera, but see this one is red now. And if you set the behavior with ncalc, for example, insert property, search for ABS, and then you get this game data ABS level. Click that. So if ABS level would be 0, this LED would be on, as you can see now. Then you can do this for every LED. I'm sure there's a way to make this more efficient. Like I said, I'm not a SimHub expert, but in theory, it will work like that. For example, if you set the next LED to ABS level is 1, then it only will turn on. Should be off now. It's not. Now it is. You have to click OK. As soon as I will set my ABS to 1, the LED will go on. You get the idea. Create 12 of these effects for every LED, and then you will always see the current ABS level in the game. And the good thing is it will not only change if you change it with this rotary, even if you change it in game with the black box or something, the colors of that LED color will always reflect your current LED status. But yeah, this should not be an in-depth SimHub tutorial. There are definitely better people that know way more about SimHub, how to do that. So if you're interested in that topic, I would recommend join the SimHub Discord or like look for SimHub tutorials on YouTube. If we talk about competition, I think there are mainly 3 names to name here. Fanatec with their McLaren wheel. I mean, this wheel pretty much does everything better than Fanatec with that McLaren rim, in my opinion. The build quality is significantly higher. It just feels better. I would also say it's a better wheel than the F1 style wheels from Fanatec, because those are just ridiculously small. I don't know how people can drive with a 27 centimeter wheel, but obviously personal preference. Then another competitor is probably the Moza KS wheel. I think this is probably Simagic's response to the Moza KS wheel. And the Moza wheel also is a very good wheel, but it feels more toyish compared to the Simagic. This feels more robust and personally gives me a subjective higher confidence that it will last longer. The shifters on the Moza are also not as good as on the Simagic, but the Moza funky switches are in a better position in my opinion. And then a third competitor that I also want to name is the Azatec Forte wheel, because all these wheels use the same material pretty much, but compared to the Azatec, I mean, the Simagic is significantly cheaper and looks about 412.7 times better than the Azatec wheel. And I would also say the overall build quality seems a little bit better on this. Especially shifters on clutches are better in my opinion. On the Azatec wheel, the encoders feel better though. And they also have more thumb rotaries, I think 6 on the Forte wheel. But Simagic has proper RGB light. I think the Azatec just has an LED above the button, which is a little odd implementation if you ask me. And the Azatec wheel also is significantly more expensive. I think it's $580 with the dual clutch. Just keep in mind, if you want to pair this with your Azatec base, you need to buy their QR, which is also pretty expensive and makes the price difference a little bit smaller. But then again, out of all those wheels that I talked about, the Simagic would be my favorite one. So to sum it up, does this wheel compete to the high-end offerings from like Usher, Cube Controls or Grid? No, not really. But you can also buy like 3 or 4 of these wheels for the price of one of those. And if we look at the price of $290, I mean, realistically, $310, because if you want to use SimHub, you need USB. But nevertheless, for that price, this wheel is insanely well built and just overall a really good wheel that I can highly recommend. And again, if you want to save even more money, use the code Dan3 on the Simagic web store or code Dan5 on Simrace shop. That gives you a little discount and gives me a little kickback. So it helps you, it helps me, win-win. But that's pretty much it for the review. I was very impressed by the GT Neo. I can highly recommend it to pretty much anyone that looks for an affordable wheel. I don't think there has been something that is this good in this price class yet. So yeah, if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. If you don't have any questions still, leave a comment maybe, that always helps with the algorithm. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel to not miss any future videos, and thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.